Welcome to Headliners Forum. We're here to bring you the best in Texas journalism, the stories behind the great stories. I'm your host, Mark Morrison. Our special guests are Patrick Michels and Brian Standefer of Texas Monthly. They are members of the team that won the Showcase Silver Award for their series called White Hats that delved into the history of the Texas Rangers around the time of the organization's 200th anniversary. This was a series of podcasts that our judges found to be one of the best jobs of storytelling by Texas journalists in 2022. Brian and Patrick, congratulations on your award and welcome to Headliners Forum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Patrick, maybe we get started if you will just tell us how the project got going and how it became a major undertaking for the team.
Yeah, I think that's a great top level place to start when you're looking at Brian and me here on the screen. The team that you'll hear on the show is pretty much everyone but us, and it's a big team of really talented folks. So Jack Cardero, the host, isn't with Texas Monthly anymore. He was a staff writer, and now he's with the LA Times as a national columnist, and so he's the lead reporter there. And he and another reporter at Texas Monthly at the time, Kat Cardenas, both had pitches about Texas history and Tejano history in the 1800s, 1900s. And Kat's pitch was specifically about the Porvenir massacre in 1918 and the Rangers and this village in far west Texas on the Mexican border. And so the idea for the show came about kind of as a mashup of all of these ideas about taking this particular episode in Rangers history and Jack's interest in his own family's history, in Mexico and then what became Texas after that. As well as our editor-in-chief, Dan Goodgame's interest in making sure that the show was about all of Ranger history too, if we were going to take on this subject of such a major icon in Texas history. We wanted to cover the whole thing. And so that's where the idea came from. And then we roped in Mike Hall, who's written a lot about Rangers history more recently, and also Christian Wallace, who had a lot to say about growing up in Texas on Ranger mythology and coming to terms with what the realities were like. And so they all kind of pitched in their ways too. So it was a big old team.
It looked like more than a dozen, at least a dozen of your staffers participated. Brian, the first episode included a visit to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame in Waco. And what did your reporters find there?
So the museum, that was Kat and Jack and Patrick went on that trip. And what they reported was the museum having just a ton of artifacts and a lot of memorabilia. They actually had the guns from famous Ranger Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez. And he described them as looking more like kind of flashy movie props, but they were the actual guns. It was so that was pretty impressive. So there was a lot of that. There's a lot of stories about famous Rangers, and then noticeably and oddly, they found the darker chapters of the Rangers in small. It covered much in a much smaller way, like for the was a small placard memorializing what happened at Porvenir, and it was kind of off the beaten path and seemed to be tucked away. And that's something that they talked about, both the amazing stories that they found, but also the darker chapters seemingly covered a little less at the museum.
Right. And actually that museum reflecting the Texas Rangers prominent place in Texas history has attracted more than 4.5 million visitors. I saw in your package. Brian, excuse me, Patrick, your series did a great job of chronicling the positive role that Rangers played in early Texas and ever since, but it also presented the darker side, as Brian uh, mentioned. What were the two sides of this story, and how did you make sure to keep your reporting balanced?
Yeah, I thought that Jack was a really interesting host for this question because it wasn't sort of what we didn't want to do was uh create a story that was about both sides. And here's one side that talks about how great the Rangers were and how what a great job they've done for all of us, and then another side that only says how terrible the Rangers are. Because the truth is always somewhere in the middle, and the more interesting thing was always, for almost everyone that Jack talked to and who shows up in the show, one of the first questions is, how did what were your first memories of the Rangers? And they're almost always positive, just the exciting Wild West type of stories, that just often be the first memory, and then the rest of that person's life is always about, to some degree, sort of metabolizing, whatever else they've learned about the Rangers history since then, and to do that work for the Rangers is really what you have to do for anything in Texas history, so the going through this process for the Rangers was really good, I think, as a way into Texas history generally. And so the the process is really about, how to be excited about Texas history and proud to be a Texan and proud of some things the Rangers have done, if that's how you're going to wind up feeling, but also to recognize the deadly history of the Rangers too, but to explain, what the priorities were at the time that, were putting the Rangers to work, for the project of making Texas what it became.
Right. Brian, what were some of the high points and low points in this whole 200-year history? I remember there was one good story that evolved from research, partially from research at Sol Ross, and about the some violence in that part of the state.
Yeah, I think it was that the publisher, the newspaper publisher, that was, I mean, just to start with a positive, I think the Rangers provided a sense of law and order, I think, to some of the rural areas of Texas that really didn't have any kind of defined police force. And their successes revolved around being called in to investigate crimes of stealing cattle or other violent crimes. And so they people, I think, leaned on the Rangers to know the state well, to be able to travel easily, and they traveled a lot on horseback and could move easily, and they actually derived a lot of those techniques and habits from the native people in the area. I think the darker parts, obviously the incidences of racism that drove their decision making, the violence that became of attacking people who are different, those kinds of stories. What happened at Porvenir, those are definitely the darker chapters. But as Patrick said, it was an interesting adventure doing this podcast, because there's arguments on one side, there's arguments on the other, and the truth is always somewhere in between that.
Yeah, and the nature of their mission changed so much over the years. They weren't always in step with what their mission might should have been.
Yeah.
The Patrick, the Texas Rangers have evolved with the state. And what is their role today in relation to city, county, and state law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they do a lot of really fascinating stuff today, and their their role is, I mean, they still, like Brian was saying, I mean, the job hasn't changed so much, maybe in some rural counties, where I mean, where there is a local sheriff's office and a city police force, but that a lot of the technology that you'd expect in modern law enforcement, the Rangers are the way to provide access to make sure that everyone in Texas, has access to that, to DNA testing, for example, or sort of I mean, like investigation management techniques, and so the Rangers are organized in companies around the state, and they there will be a ranger for one region of East Texas and one region of West Texas, and so they still do range around portions of Texas, and they're the one of the key pieces of law enforcement for serious some of the most serious crimes in the state. And as well as working in cities. Mike Hall worked on the 5th episode that gets into modern Rangers a lot, and one of the Rangers he talked to mentioned that he actually, I'm sorry, it was a DA he talked to who had always thought the Rangers would be so cool to work with, when he was a DA in Dallas, and so he never really got to work with them very much. But then there was a very very notable case in Kaufman County, just outside of Dallas, and that was the case where he really did get involved with them and got to see them in action too.
Right. I think there are fewer than 200 Texas Rangers for a state as large as this. So their impact is is targeted in specific areas. And Brian, what kind of feedback did you get from the Texas Rangers leadership and rank and file, as you presented a lot of history that they are not accustomed to hearing?
Well, that's true. Everybody was very respectful. I think we got a little bit of pushback just because, I think from the perspective of the Rangers, the media in general tend to spend a lot of time on the negative. And I think one of the criticisms we got a few times was that we weren't covering the whole story. We were covering the bad and not the good. And it was interesting because it was through our reporter Jack Eda's lens, which included part of his family and his history in Texas, and a lot of and shares a lot of that perspective with a lot of Mexican Americans and those that have family history of run-ins with the Rangers. But in general, everybody was very respectful, and we welcomed all those criticisms, and in fact included them in the episode as well, just conversations with folks. There were a lot of Rangers that decided not to participate in this, and that's absolutely their right, and so we got as many perspectives as we could.
Right. Brian, Texas Monthly is known for its compelling long-form journalism. Could you describe how the newsroom is evolving to deploy multimedia, including great podcasts like these?
Sure. So, as a lot of media is doing, they're having to expand into multimedia. And I came on board about 5 years ago to help build a podcast division to help storytelling and to supplement what was going on in the magazine. And at the same time, we kind of had our eye on video as well, and we're just starting to ramp that up as well. We've been interviewing for a videographer position to help us steer the Texas Monthly video. We also purchased a TV show, Texas Country Reporter, So we've been looking at ways that we can bring that into our fold and keep that story going the way it has for 50 years. And I think it's kind of timely that, Texas Monthly being 50 years old, that, we're getting into all these different ways to tell stories. That's what we're known for, is telling great stories. And um, it just seems natural that we find as many ways as we can to do that.
It's not an easy transition for a magazine to make, but you guys are sure doing it. Patrick, for our student viewers, how do you recommend they prepare themselves for jobs in the fast-changing media world? I presume that being ready for multimedia and different platforms is a part of that.
Boy, what a question. Yeah, I think that we're always, even when you're working in the media world, you're always thinking one step ahead of what it might look like in 5 years too. So it's a great question. I mean, um, I think that I've found it worthwhile to keep an open mind about the medium that I want to use to tell a story. And I studied writing in college. I studied photojournalism in college, um, video journalism. I got into podcast making mid-career after working. I was a writer, and then I got to work for a public radio show as well, and got to learn audio production that way. Um, and there's always going to be the next thing coming along as well. And so I think that if you have an idea of what kind of stories you want to work on, or what kind of area, if you want to be a local daily reporter, or you want to do large magazine projects or big international things as well, then the best thing you can do is get at least a sense of what it looks like to make something, for audio and for video and for magazines and for newspapers, and get to know some editors in all of those fields as well. And even just trying things out, you get a sense of what interests you. So it's always that balance between following the thing that excites you the most about being in journalism and staying in the industry, and also getting to know the folks and the skills that will let you keep doing the work.
Yeah, and I think also, something that I'd add to that, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm not, I never really subscribe to the sometimes we hear the message of find one thing and do it well kind of a thing. And I would advise, for people to learn as many skills as they can, varying, wear as many hats as you can in telling the story. Learn how to engineer, learn how to report, learn how to write. Maybe write music. The more hats you wear, I think the better off you're going to be down the road, because you can pivot to different jobs, and when people join the team, there's those concentric circles that can be moved around more easily with more skills.
All right. If I seem to recall, you had a career in music before you transitioned into what you're doing now. Is that right?
Yes, sir, I did. Yeah, many years.
And were you writing music? I know you were performing with bands and so forth.
Yeah, I did. I performed. I was a touring musician for many years, and then I also wrote music, and did some scoring work as well. And I've definitely taken those skills with me to Texas Monthly, and not just writing the music for the things that we do, but also sort of finding parallels between music and telling stories, because at the end of the day, that's what I see music as, is just another medium for stories.
Great point. Patrick and Brian, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Our judges were impressed with the thoroughness of your reporting and the great storytelling. You can listen to Texas Monthly's outstanding podcast series, White Hats, by hitting the link on our site, headlinersfoundation.org. You will also find interviews with other award-winning Texas journalists. From my colleague and forum producer, Gary Pickle, I'm Mark Morrison.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.